If you're struggling with exhaustion, weight you can't shift, or mood swings that feel like a roller coaster, you've probably hit one of two walls. Either you've had your hormones tested and told they're perfectly normal, even though you feel anything but, or you've been told by your doctor that testing just isn't worth it because the hormones fluctuate throughout the month and you can't get an accurate reading. Here's the truth, your doctor is actually half right. Hormones do fluctuate, which is exactly why a blood test on a random day is a terrible way to measure your hormones. It's like trying to understand a 2-hour movie by just looking at the trailer. Today I'm going to walk you through the most advanced metabolic mapping tool we have in functional medicine. It's the Dutch hormone test. And by the end of this video, you'll see why your blood tests might be lying to you and what your body is actually doing with your hormones. I'm Michael Smith, a naturopathic doctor, and this is the test I use most often in my practice when I need to do a full hormone panel. So first, what is the Dutch test? The Dutch test stands for Dried Urine Test for Comprehensive Hormones. The collection is simple. You urinate onto filter paper strips at 4 or 5 points throughout the day, waking, later in the morning, afternoon, evening, and at bedtime. The strips dry overnight and you mail them back to the lab. Simple. That's it. No need to go to a clinic, no needles, and you do it at home. Now this test, it's a valuable test for both men and women, and today I'll be going through one of the results. That's a female report, but the male report is basically the same with a couple of key things I'll flag. The most important thing to understand before we look at this report is this. A blood test measures what's circulating in your blood at a single moment in time. The Dutch test measures the metabolites leaving your body in the urine. And that's what your cells are actually doing with the hormones. Think of it this way. A blood test is like looking at your bank balance at 8 a.m. It tells you what's sitting there, but not where the money came from or how it's being spent. The Dutch test is like looking at your monthly statement. It shows every transaction, the income, how you're spending it, and the transfers, which is like the metabolism. So you can have a normal balance, but be still going bankrupt if you're spending too much. I'll leave a link in the description where you can find out more about the Dutch test, how to order it, and it can be shipped anywhere in the world. So let's have a look at a report. This is page 1 of the report, the hormone testing summary. The whole report is 13 pages long, but this is a good page to start, and you'll see the 4 main sections. The top left is estrogen and progesterone production. Top right, you've got estrogen metabolism. And in the middle, we've got androgen production and also metabolism. At the bottom of the summary page, we've got cortisol. The results are displayed as dial gauges. And before we go further, let me explain the color system because it applies to everything that you see here. The green band is the optimal premenopausal range. The purple band is the postmenopausal range, and an orange star means you're at the end of the range. A red dot means you're out of the range. Now here's the most important thing to understand about this page. The left side of the page looks at the hormone levels being produced. The right side is showing how your body's metabolizing or what they're doing with those hormones. Most standard blood tests only give you the left side, the production. So the top left, we look at the estrogen and progesterone. The first 2 dials are estradiol and progesterone, and this tells you the production levels. Estradiol is the most potent form of estrogen, and where it sits at the dial relative to the green band gives you a starting point. But it's only a starting point. The progesterone is just as important and often misunderstood. Most people think of progesterone as a fertility hormone, and it is, but it also does a lot more. Progesterone breakdown products act directly on GABA receptors in the brain. These are the same calming receptors that help with things like sleep and anxiety. Which means low progesterone doesn't just act on fertility. It disrupts sleep, it increases anxiety, it affects mood, and it's also the ratio that's important. You can have progesterone that looks normal on its own, but if the estrogen is high, the balance is off. And that's known as estrogen excess. And that can drive symptoms like heavy periods, breast tenderness, mood changes, poor sleep, even when neither hormone is technically out of range on its own. And this is one of the most common patterns I see in perimenopause. Leave a comment below if you have done the Dutch test but found it overwhelming and did not really understand it. My goal by the end of this video is that you will. Or leave a comment if you would like to do this test. Page 2 of the report shows the full hormone pathway map. Every conversion step laid out visually. And when you first see it, it looks like a lot, but once you understand it, it starts to make sense. And I'll go much deeper on estrogen metabolism, the 3 different pathways, and what can shift you to the wrong ones in a separate video. Now let's look at the report, starting with the androgens. Most people think of androgens as male hormones, but they matter enormously for women too. For things like energy, libido, muscle mass, mood, cognition, bone density, and even fertility. Androgens help to drive all of that. And the first dial is total DHEA production. DHEA is mainly made in the adrenal glands, so this is like a proxy for adrenal health. And it's also a prohormone, meaning it can convert to things like testosterone and even estrogen downstream. So when DHEA is high or low, this can affect the rest of the hormones. The second dial, testosterone. A blood test measures the total circulating testosterone. The Dutch test measures what's actively used in the tissues, which is more clinically significant. A blood test can still be good to see how much you are producing, but knowing what's actually happening at a tissue level is more important. And the third dial is something called 5-Androenadiol, and you won't see this measured on a blood test. Here's what it is. Testosterone enters cells and converts to 5-alpha-DHT, which is 3 times more potent than testosterone. 5-alpha-DHT then converts into 5-Androenadiol, which leaves the cell, enters the urine, and gets measured here. So this marker is a window into what's actually happening inside the tissue, not what's happening in the cells. This is why I see women regularly who have been told their testosterone is completely normal, but they're losing their hair, they're breaking out, or dealing with facial hair. Their blood tests look fine, but their 5-alpha-androstenediol is elevated, and that can tell us a completely different story. The issue is what's happening in the tissue, not in the blood. And the fourth assessment is the alpha-beta metabolism. This tells you which direction the androgens are being processed. The alpha pathway produces more potent androgenic forms. The beta pathway is a gentler, less active form. High alpha preference combined with the elevated androgens is what you commonly see in conditions like PCOS. And this can push things like insulin resistance, blood sugar dysregulation, and inflammation. They're all things we can address. This also affects men. High levels of 5-alpha-DHT and 5-alpha-androstenediol can lead to more prostate symptoms, hair loss, male pattern baldness. So looking at that, I can understand what needs to be treated or not. Next is estrogen, and the test measures the 3 different types of estrogen and how they are getting metabolized. A blood test never measures how estrogen is getting metabolized. After estrogen is used by the body, it gets broken down. And here's the critical part. It doesn't just get broken down, it takes one of 3 possible exit routes. Think of this as like 3 doors. The first door, the 2-OH pathway, is the safe route. These metabolites are stable, protective, and they clear cleanly from the body. You want most of your estrogen going through this door. The second door is the 16-OH pathway. This is the estrogenic route. These metabolites continue to act like estrogens in the tissues, and too much estrogen this way can amplify the estrogenic effects, leading to things like heavy periods, breast tenderness, fibroids, and endometriosis. The third door is the middle one. That's the 4-OH pathway. And this is the one you don't really want dominating. These metabolites can bind directly to DNA and damage it. This pathway is associated with increased risk of breast cancer. Things like hormone replacement therapy can sometimes scare people. With this test, we can actually see specifically who's at risk and how to fix it with nutrients to make sure that you're metabolizing the hormones down the right pathway. And in men with a higher prostate cancer risk, these 2 slider bars show you the balance between these pathways. If the marker is sitting too far to the left, your body's favoring the 16-OH or the 4-OH over the safe 2-OH route. And that's what we need to address to improve estrogen metabolism. Now there's one more thing here, and that's phase 2 methylation. Once estrogen has been processed through phase 1, it goes down the methylation route via an enzyme called COMT. It does this by adding a methyl group. The methylation activity slider shows you how well this process is working. Low methylation means estrogen isn't being cleared safely, even after it's been broken down. And the nutrients that drive this process, things like B12, B6, and other methylation cofactors, are exactly why we do the organic acids test on this test. And we'll talk about that in a moment. Now let's talk about cortisol. This is the section that confuses most people. And it's also the section where blood tests fall short. A morning blood cortisol number gives you one test at one particular moment of the day, and it's just measuring total cortisol and not free cortisol. But cortisol follows a rhythm. It rises sharply when you wake up, and it should peak around 30 minutes after getting out of bed. Then it gradually declines throughout the day, and so you don't want to see high levels in the late afternoon or evening. And it should be close to 0 by bedtime. And it's when that rhythm breaks down that you feel it. The fatigue that doesn't improve with sleep, energy crashes in the afternoon, or that wired but tired feeling at nighttime. poor stress tolerance, weight that won't shift, despite doing everything right. The Dutch test plots cortisol across the entire day, and the pattern that it reveals is often completely different to what a morning blood test would show. The first cortisol assessment is the daily free cortisol pattern. Have a look at the graph here. The shaded area is the normal range, and the line is the patient's values. And what you're looking for is not just whether cortisol is high or low, you're looking at when it's high or low. Someone with elevated overnight cortisol has a completely different problem to someone whose cortisol is normal in the morning but spikes after dinner. And you would treat these people very differently. The Dutch Plus version of the test also captures the cortisol awakening response, and that surge should happen in the morning 30 minutes after waking. A blunted cortisol awakening response is one of the most consistent markers of chronic stress and burnout that we have. It's a response that a single blood test just cannot capture. And the second assessment is the 24-hour cortisol. This adds up all of the cortisols, giving you an overall number of how much cortisol you're producing in a day. And here's why that matters. The adrenals can be working overtime, producing large amounts of cortisol, but if it's being cleared rapidly, the circulating level may look normal or even low. The free cortisol graph looks fine, but the metabolized cortisol can often tell the real story. This is the distinction between what's in the blood and what's actually happening in the body. And the fourth assessment is the cortisol clearance rate. How fast is cortisol being cleared from circulation? Fast clearance is associated with obesity, insulin resistance, inflammation, and hypothyroidism. Now, one more section that I want to briefly highlight is the organic acid markers. And most people look at this and wonder, why is there a gut marker on my hormone test? And what does B12 have to do with estrogen? And these are valid questions. The organic acid markers are included because they directly influence how your hormones are made and detoxified. B12 and B6 are critical cofactors for methylation, which, as we just discussed, is essential for safe estrogen clearance. The gut dysbiosis marker connects to something called beta-glucuronidase. That's best tested in a stool test, and that's an enzyme in the gut that can reactivate estrogen that was supposed to be cleared, and you can start to get it reabsorbed back into the body. Melatonin directly connects to the cortisol rhythm, so that's why these organic markers are on the test. Now let's talk about the two versions of the test, because this is a question I get asked regularly. There's the Dutch Complete and the Dutch Plus. Both cover the full sex hormone panel, estrogen, progesterone, androgens, and how they're getting metabolized, plus the organic acid markers. They're both identical. Both are available for men and women, and the reference ranges will just differ between the sexes. The only difference between the Dutch Plus and the Dutch Complete is how the cortisol is measured. The Dutch Complete measures cortisol through urine samples at 4 or 5 points throughout the day, and this gives you a solid picture of the cortisol rhythm and is perfectly adequate for most people. The Dutch Plus adds the urine plus a 5-point saliva cortisol panel. So this measures the cortisol awakening response in more detail, and it gives you a precise cortisol picture. And this is particularly good for people whose main concern is things like burnout, chronic fatigue, sleep disruption. So here's how you decide which test is the best for you. If your main concern is the sex hormones, go for the Dutch Complete. They both measure exactly the same. So if you want to find out about menopause, perimenopause, male hormone health, the Complete will give you everything. If fatigue, burnout, sleep disruption, cortisol rhythm is your primary concern, the Plus is worth the extra investment, and it's an extra $100 for the Plus too, so that can be another deciding factor. Both tests need to be ordered through a practitioner, and there's a link in the description which has more details about how to order through Planet Naturopath, and this test can be shipped worldwide. And over the coming weeks, I'll go into much deeper videos about estrogen metabolism, the androgens, and the adrenal pathways. Leave a comment if you have done a Dutch test and you've found it helpful or confusing, or if you're interested in doing a Dutch test, leave a comment if you've got any questions about whether this is right for you or not. And if you want to find out more information about the Dutch Complete versus the Dutch Plus test, watch this video next.